It was on these grounds that approximately 250 cadets from the Virginia Military Institute attacked Union artillery and infantrymen on the ridge across from us, gaining immortality as a result here in the state of Virginia. Pomni, how do you feel about making a charge across those fields? Welcome to another edition of Retracing History here on Redoubt Productions. And today we are in the Shenandoah Valley, and we're actually basically right on the border of Newmarket, Virginia, which was the scene of a small but very pivotal battle in the American Civil War on May 15th, 1864. Well, not only are we going to explore the battlefield, we're also going to explore the Virginia Civil War Museum, which is located right on the battlefield. So we got a museum all about the American Civil War to explore. We've got an actual battlefield beyond with some very important legacy here. Unfortunately, we only have about 2 hours to really explore everything, so we're really just going to hit the highlights. I can't tell you all what we're going to see, but let's see what we can discover before this episode's over. Well, before we head into the Virginia Civil War Museum, just want to draw your attention to its design. You'll notice it kind of looks like a drum with muskets leaned to it, and that's intentional. It's part of the design of the building to reflect what it's preserving inside, the story of the Civil War in Virginia. So it's thinking of iconic symbols like muskets and drums when the public come and visit. So as the exhibits pass for 1863 into 1864, there's a whole talk about the Overland Campaign, which, boy, this summer we've kind of been beating out like a dead horse here on Redoubt Productions. But please check out the Overland Campaign coverage we did on Uncut History. But in short, Grant is going to have multiple Union armies moving into the Confederacy simultaneously, and he hopes that's going to bleed them thin. So here you can see the main Overland Campaign, the Army of the Potomac, battling with the Army of North Virginia. But at the same time, Franz Sigel's small little army of the Army of West Virginia, the Department of West Virginia, they're making their way up the Shenandoah Valley, hoping to threaten rail lines that are located in the valley, bringing all those vital crops in the breadbasket Confederacy to Richmond and other front lines. So that was Sigel's mission, to cut those rail lines. But Breckinridge's small Confederate army would blunt Sigel's attack here May 15, 1864. So Breckinridge, who was the Confederate commander at the Battle of Newmarket, before that, he was actually one of the presidential candidates in the 1860 election. He was running for the Southern Democrat ticket. And Breckinridge himself really didn't particularly want to do it, but he was nominated and tried to do essentially his civic duty for what he felt was his country as in the southern states. What they have here is his set of dueling pistols, which were made sometime around the 1840s. That's incredible. I admire dueling sets.
Dueling sets are very nice.
Yeah, dueling pistol sets are fascinating. We totally in no way condoned the practice of dueling here at Redoubt
Bring back
Productions.
dueling.
We say that in the same breath.
Yeah, no. Jokingly.
Are you sure about that?
Dueling is bad, okay? You know, it's...
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Good. It's kind of hard to see in the case here, but there is a Confederate presentation sword that was given around the midpoint of the conflict to John C. Breckinridge by 2 brigades of the Confederate Army of Tennessee. Breckinridge spent most of the Civil War actually out in the Western Theater under the command of General Braxton Bragg, which Breckinridge and Bragg did not see eye to eye, and that got Breckinridge into a little bit of trouble, a little bit of political trouble, as did Bragg, and their falling out ultimately sent Breckinridge east to reinforce the Army in North Virginia. That's why he ends up in Newmarket. But in any case, there is a sword here inscribed, "From Finley's and Bates' brigade to General Breckinridge, a mark of esteem and admiration for their much-loved commander." So this is Lieutenant Colonel Scott Shipp, who was in charge of the Corps of Cadets in the battle at Newmarket. He'd actually graduated Vietnam in 1859 and go on to become their superintendent. Well, he actually have on display his uniform, and it's a little bit moth-bitten, but man does it tell a story. So this is a uniform also that was very likely here at Newmarket during the battle. And what's even more incredible, Chip was wounded during the battle, and he was wounded after he was wounded. He was trying to get on a tree, but he was having some difficulty. Well, that tree he was struggling to cling to after he was wounded was a cherry tree, and some of the cadets actually went out to the Bouchon farm, cut a stick off it, and turned it into a cane for Chip. I love these relics. And here we have an original uniform of a VMI cadet that fought here at Newmarket. This uniform actually saw the battlefield that, if we have the time, we'll get to see either on this video or another edition of Retracing History. This was property of Cadet Francis Lee Smith, who graduated class of 1867. He was actually wounded twice, and one of the bullet holes went right through the collar of his uniform. You can still see it all frayed there. And what gets more incredible, he actually saved the bullet that almost killed him and had it engraved with basically a gold setting on it. How do I know that? Well, it's right here. This is the bullet that almost killed Smith here at the Battle of Newmarket. And look at the gold, making that acorn, that battle relic there. So the main reason we're out here in Newmarket is actually because we went and visited Bedford, Virginia, and talked about the Bedford boys, 19 men, later 20, that were killed during the D-Day landings. Well, one of the big part of that story is the sending of Western Union telegrams, putting them all together and sending them to all the families in Bedford to release the news of their loved ones being lost. Well, kind of showing you that things don't really change in 100 years. They go 100 years before World War II, American Civil War. This is actually from the Southern Telegraph Company telling a family that they had lost a loved one in battle during the American Civil War. It's actually, if you look there closely, it's May 16th, 1864, so it's actually for a Confederate soldier that was killed in the Battle of Newmarket. Some things never change in history, unfortunately. Yeah, I know, I'm wearing my cap backwards. I've never done it before. A little bit unprofessional, but the sun is to my neck. It's to our rear right now. So we want to keep us from having sunburns. And neck sunburn is the worst sunburn you can get. Can you attest, the humble collector?
Oh, yes.
Yes, it's the worst. In any case, we've stepped outside of the Virginia Civil War Museum, and we're about to walk in the footsteps of the VMI cadets who fought here at the Battle of Newmarket. Now, the Battle of Newmarket's a lot bigger than what people expect. It is involving a battle that starts in the morning through noon through afternoon. There's multiple phases to its attack. In fact, over my shoulder across I-81, there's a whole other segment of preserved battlefield dealing with the 54th Pennsylvania and their Union defense in what they call the Bloody Cedars. I'm sadly not going to have time today to cover it, but what we are going to cover is the most famous aspect of the Battle of Newmarket, so keep that in mind. This is occurring late in the day during the Battle of Newmarket when the VMI cadets step out. And what are we expecting? Well, here we are. Behind my shoulder is what we know as Manor Hill, or I kind of call it erroneously Moore Hill, because Moore's brigade, Union Brigade, actually had set up there at the start of the battle. In the early morning phase of the battle, they're driven off by parts of Breckinridge's Confederate Army. However, rain's going to start to take its toll on both sides. This was not a hot, sunny day like today. This was poured rain, there's lightning, it is a mess. All this ground is just dirt. That's going to kind of stall both Breckinridge and Sigel's efforts to try to push the other off the battlefield. And as we enter the afternoon phase of the fighting, the Confederate battle line settles on Manor Hill behind me. And then behind you, the camera, as we're walking toward, is the Bouchon Farm, which is in the bottom of a bit of depression before you ascend onto Bouchon Ridge, where the Union battle line is reforming. And they got artillery up there, which makes it very difficult for the Confederates to push off of Manor Hill behind me down to the Bouchon Farm to attack the Union again. They're kind of, if you come over that ridge line, you're going to be shot to pieces. So initially, you're going to have Confederate regulars. They're going to make their way down from Manor Hill, walking where we're going, and they're going to come over to the Bouchon Farm. However, they're going to have quite a difficult time holding it. Now you'll notice over there is a cannon right next to the road. That's actually to denote a Confederate artillery battery. What Breckinridge did during his battle was a bit unusual, at least for the American Civil War. He was technically using outdated tactics, but he had to due to his limited numbers. He would move the artillery amongst the front lines of the infantry. Usually during the Civil War, the artillery is kept immediately behind the infantry. What Breckinridge is actually doing is a Mexican war tactics, where you move the artillery and infantry all in one line. And he has to do that because he only has about 4,000 soldiers. He has to work with his limited resources. So he's inching with all branches of the military closer and closer to the Union battle line. In the middle of the cadets' attack is going to be the Bushong Farm. It's right in the middle of the Confederate battle line up on Manor Hill. And then you also have on Bushong Hill itself where the Union battle line is. Reading from the Ways side here. On June 22nd, 1791, Henry Bushong patented a 260-acre tract in the Shenandoah County that would be home for several generations of his descendants. Henry's son Jacob married Sarah Strickler in 1818 and built a 4-room log house and raised 4 boys and 2 girls. In 1825, Jacob Bushong built this vernacular federal-style home. In 1852, expansion provided extra room for the family. The Bushongs raised wheat, oats, cattle, hogs, and horses. Wheelwright and blacksmith shops provided farm implements for the Bushongs and other area families. The family worked alongside free African-American slaves on the property, an unnamed man, a woman named Mary, and a young boy, Israel. On May 15, 1864, 7 family members took refuge in their sturdy cellar at the Battle of New Market raged around them. Peering through the windows, they saw the VMI cadets pass on the east and west sides of the house as they marched to join the Confederate battle line. After the battle, the house and barn, like most building in and around New Market, served as a hospital. As the Battle of New Market reached its zenith, General Breckinridge only had the 257 cadets from the Virginia Military Institute to reinforce his battle line. But that was a decision Breckinridge dreaded making. The age of the cadets ranged from 15 to 24, with several coming from Virginia's most affluent families. Some families had enrolled their sons at the outbreak of the war to prevent them from being conscripted and turned into another casualty in the newspapers. That does not mean the Institute was detached from reality. Over the course of the conflict, the cadets were called upon for training and guard duty for regular Confederate Army operations. Yet every time they were kept out of harm's way, maintaining their handsome appearance. Regular soldiers often heckled the cadets for the privilege to dress like a soldier, yet avoid the hardships of battle. The cadets were not content with the safety in the walls of VMI. They were hungry for the opportunity to prove themselves as equals to the regulars on both sides of the battlefield. On May 15, 1864, both Breckinridge's nightmare and the cadets' dream would be fulfilled. Now, when the cadets are called forward or coming down here to plug a gap in the center of the Confederate battle line, should they not be able to plug this gap, well, Breckinridge's troops are going to be in a very bad position, kind of stuck in this little bowl that the Bushong Farm sits in. As the cadets come over the rises behind me, they're going to start taking artillery fire. It's the first time they're really under hostile fire during the American Civil War. That's what makes this distinct and why it's so important. The cadets are actually seeing combat use, which was something Breckinridge had tried to stop for so long. And there's a often mentioned quote that when Breckinridge realizes he has nobody else to throw in this gap but the VMI cadets, he says, "Send the boys in and may God forgive me." So the cadets come over those rises, take heavy artillery fire, and they suffer their first casualties. They move slow, marching as if it's a parade, which sometimes is mythologized to make it sound like that how great their discipline is, they're holding formation, which is true, but also they weren't used to being under fire before, and most of the regular troops are bolting down here to the Bushong Farm. So that's what leads to some of their first losses, inexperience on the battlefield. They're then going to come down through the Bushong Farm, which we've just walked through, and well, we're in the bottom of 2 ridges. Manor Hill to our rear, where the rest of the Confederate battle line is kind of trying to reform. Those guys have been cut apart and fallen back. And then over my shoulder is Bushong Hill itself, Bushong Ridge, where there's a line of Union infantry and Union artillery pieces pelting away at the front of the Confederates. when they move down into the Bouchon farm, the cadets going to take even more losses. I think there's about 3 or 4 of them that are lost right around here, including a relative of Thomas Jefferson. I think that's a grandnephew of his is actually going to be killed in action here. At that point, they're going to step from the farm and they're going to try to move quickly to the shelter on the far end of this orchard. It's around this point that their commander, Lieutenant Colonel Shipp, is going to be wounded. At this point, I believe is a Cadet Wise is going to take charge, if I'm not mistaken. He's going to double check me. He's going to fact check me.
Captain Henry Wise, the VMI staff.
Okay, he's Captain Henry Wise of the VMI staff. So he's going to make his way forward and try to lead the cadets over here to this snake rail fence to find some cover and figure out how they're going to take on the hill itself. So I did not even know this monument was here. We saw a wayside by the orchard for the Bouchon farm, where the VMI cadets were. Well, keep in mind, the Battle of Newmark is not just about the VMI cadets. This is dedicated to a contingent of Missouri cavalrymen who are commanded, if I can read the wayside correctly, it's commanded by, Charles Woodson. Sorry about that, distracted by the highway, birds, my brain frying as we speak. Yeah, it was dedicated to a contingent of Missouri cavalrymen who participated in this fight, commanded by Charles Woodson. There's his photograph here. And you can see they're here in the same farm where the VMI cadets are. They're basically on the right flank of the VMI cadets. And they would ultimately suffer 4 killed and another 35 wounded in this action. There were actually cavalry units in front that made up the front line of the Confederate attack. We talk about the artillery being shoulder to shoulder with the infantry. Well, there were dismounted Confederate cavalry involved with it as well. So this is commemorating one of those. And this is one of only 2 monuments on the entire battlefield dedicated by actual veterans. It's the only one for Confederates. The only one for Union is over across the way for the 54th Pennsylvania. So the VMI cadets did not actually come out and commemorate a monument on their own behalf, but Woodson's did. Now, it's amongst the cadets a decision is made to try to assault where some of the 34th Massachusetts are lined up, and also particularly there's an Union artillery battery over here, which is a bit of a tempting target for the cadets, albeit it is a terribly long distance. So in any case, a charge is going to begin with the cadets as well as other of the Confederate regulars, and they're going to start moving their way up this field up onto Bouchon Ridge. This is the actual field of lost shoes we're walking through. If you've ever heard about it in the American Civil War, this tale of schoolboys charging through the mud, this is where it happened. This is where it actually occurred. Now the reason it's called the Field of Lost Shoes is because the battle's occurring in a bit of a rainstorm. As I mentioned earlier, this ground was nothing but mud. So the mud was so thick, it was pulling the shoes off of the feet of the cadets as they charged toward the artillery pieces and the Union battle line. I want to say too, I've heard about the Field of Lost Shoes for many years. I did not realize it is this steep. It's not the biggest hill we've ever walked on a battlefield, but just look around us. It's 200 yards, open ground. There's no cover. And we are going up a pretty steep grade. So especially considering this is all covered in mud, it's soaking wet. You're going to be tripping and sliding as you're trying to go forward. You don't want to stand, because if you stay still, you are an easy target for Union artillerymen and infantrymen. And at the end of that lengthy charge, the VMI cadets will take a single cannon. This was left, according to the brochure we're given, was left by von Kleister's 34th New York
30th.
Apologies, the 30th.
Yeah.
Look, it's hot out. We're probably being bitten by ticks and other horrible things. Bear with me. So let's take that from the top. What was it again?
Von Kleister's 30th New York Battery.
Von Kleister's 30th New York Battery. As they see the cadets and as well as the regulars that are following behind them moving through this muddy field, these guys decided it's probably best we bug out, and they left actually an artillery piece. So this is a representation of the lone gun that the VMI cadets will capture, and kind of completes the myth of the Field of Lost Shoes, that these schoolboys charge across a muddy field, kind of going against orders, and achieve what the regulars could not, and take an artillery piece as prize. We're now looking from the right flank of the Union battle line of Bushong Farm. And imagine that you're up here, maybe you're with the 34th Massachusetts or the 1st West Virginia, and you've already been through much fighting in the morning. You've been fighting through graveyards in Newmarket. You've fallen back up here on this very dominant hillside here, looking north of the town. And you're able to hold the first Confederate attack on your new position, kind of pin them up down there in that bowl that I'm describing where the Bushong Farm is. And you're probably thinking, all right, we've salvaged the day. It was a little shaky start, but we're outnumbering the Confederates. And then you see a decent grade block. It's about 250 of them moving from the rest of the battle line, just moving forward across this muddy field as you're pouring artillery fire and musket fire. How are you going to react to that? On one hand, you're going to think, those people are foolish. But on the other hand, those people are moving very fast. And that's kind of what goes through the mentality of men like von Kleister's battery down there, why they start pulling out and everything as this charge comes forward. Because while the VMI cadets may have never been in battle before, you still don't want to deal with people who apparently don't have an understanding of the very mortal situation they're in. You don't want to get in, you don't want to go bayonet to bayonet to somebody if they're willing to throw caution to the wind like this. So whether it was smart or really, really dumb or really, really just in the heat of the moment, the VMI cadets charge does lead to the Confederate victory here at Newmarket and the Union abandoning this position here on the Bushong Ridge. There would still be fighting happening for the rest of the day. It's a running battle between Breckinridge and Sigel going farther and farther north of Newmarket, several more miles. You're going to have Captain DuPont's Union artillery. They're going to fire by recoil, falling back up the Valley Pike to try to save the rest of the Union Army. So the battle does not end here at the Bushong Farm. But this is the part of the Battle of Newmarket, which otherwise this battle probably will not be remembered as much. A lot of the battles in the Shenandoah Valley are largely overshadowed by what Thomas Stonewall Jackson did in 1862. A lot of these actions in 1864 do not get into your average history book on American military history. Had it not been for the Field of Lost Shoes, however, this is the one thing that is saved from this otherwise overlooked aspect of the American Civil War. The casualties were high for the VMI Cadet Battalion. Of the approximately 250 that participate here in the fighting, 10 are going to ultimately die from their participation here, and another 45 are going to be wounded. So they suffer one of the highest casualty rates of any unit during the Battle of Newmarket. History of Waffles was out here a few months ago, did a very good, far more in-depth story of the Battle of Newmarket. Please check it out. It is one of the best accounts of the battle. He actually put it in perspective for me. Though this is a small battle, 4,000 Confederates, 6,000 Union, if you do the casualty rate for some of these, the casualty percentage among some of these individual units, some of these units suffer their highest casualty rate of any battle right here. So though small in scale, this was still a very brutal, bloody action of the American Civil War. And because of what the VMI cadets did here, the Virginia Military Institute are completely engulfed in it. It is part of their mantra, the charge that happens here on May 15th, 1864. Every year to this day, new recruits to Virginia Military Institute, which are dubbed the Rats, they are made as part of their initiation to charge this field, cover the 200 yards that the VMI Cadet Battalion did in 1864 to become cadets at the Virginia Military Institute. So this is a very important piece of ground for the history of the state of Virginia. after the attack at Newmarket, of the 10 cadets that were killed here, 6 were ultimately interred at the Virginia Military Institute. And every year they read an honor roll at their graves. The VMI cadets do to this day. So here's an image of Virginia mourning her dead. That's the monument there overlooking those 6 graves. And every year cadets at VMI read out all 10 of their names. Now, initially they had modest headstones, but those were replaced with flat footers here in 2005. Well, VMI turned over those original headstones here to the Virginia Museum of the Civil War. And here they are right in front of the museum. Here we have C.F. Atwill, J.C. Wheelwright, Thomas Jefferson, W.H. McDowell, Henry Jenner Jones, and G.G. Crockett. Now keep in mind there were 4 more cadets that ultimately died because of their experiences here at Newmarket. But these are the headstones, the original headstones of the 6 cadets now interred at VMI. And that monument that's over their graves is actually created by one of the cadets that served with these 6 gentlemen. That would be Moses Ezekiel. Went on to have a prolific career as a sculptor for the 19th and early 20th centuries. Well, that's the Field of Lost Shoes in Newmarket, Virginia, site of one of the most mythologized events of the American Civil War. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button down below. And if you want to follow us in our future adventures, consider subscribing. And also, we predominantly talk about 18th and 19th century American military history here. But if you want to talk more about 20th century military history, the World Wars, check out a Humble Collector's page. Hey. He's been appearing on and off in a lot of our videos over the years because we usually tag team when we go out to these historic sites. He's also my designated chauffeur. In any case, consider subscribing to his channel. It's what he asks in order to be compensated for me dragging him on each trip. So I don't have to pay him. He just asks for a lot of subscriptions. So consider heading his way to learn more about the history of the World Wars. Well, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time and whatever our travels take us next to.